Only thing unplugged is Forgotten Seasons.
All right, welcome back. Today, we're really excited. We got a guy who isn't on the usual podcast tour, but he had an incredible 15-year career. He's an all-star. He's a two-time champion, and just a dude that I think has a really unique perspective on what the NBA is and kind of his place in it. So it's an honor. Welcome to the show, David West. Thank you for joining.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me.
D. West, before we even get started, during your career playing in the NBA, we obviously run into guys. We got tattoos. We got guys with Mighty Mouse tattoos. We got guys with, Batman tattoos, you know what I mean? Nicknames from you. On the other hand, I always knew that something was going on with you is because you had the Fibonacci sequence tattoo.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what I mean? What was it, but before we even get started, what was the significance of the Fibonacci sequence to you, and why did you decide to get it tattooed?
It more so it represents like the cycle or the circle of life.
Yeah.
And so it's just always something that intrigued me. It's one of a few different pieces of, I guess, artwork like that. But more so just it's emblematic of the cycle of life that we're all on. And I've got my kids' initials up on it as well. So it kind of ties it all together.
Like I said, I knew it was something that we already getting somewhere right off the bat. We knew it was something different about D. West off top. He wasn't just, you know what I mean, the Batman or, a nickname or something like that. It was something, there was some thought behind it. Your work ethic, D. West, is I remember hearing stories or about how hard you worked in the gym, getting thousands of shots up, you know what I mean, as sometimes a day. You obviously went to Hargrave Military Academy, and shout out, Kevin Yeats was your coach there, correct?
Yeah, Coach Keats.
Coach Keats, yeah.
Yeah.
Where does that work ethic come from? And was it from Hargrave Military? Did it precede Hargrave Military? Where did you get that work ethic to really just go how to go about your business?
Yeah, so I mean, I just learned. My dad was a hardworking man. Was just a working class dude. So I always had the idea that you had to work for whatever it is you were gonna get. Like my dad had 2-3 jobs sometimes. So I grew up, kind of just understanding that, I had to work, regardless of what I was doing, whether I was going to be a mailman like my dad or going to the military like my dad did. Either way, I was going to have to work. So I just applied that to basketball. I've always been a guy that, I never had all of the natural gifts, you know what I'm saying? And I grew late, my body developed late and all that stuff. So it was important for me to just have an ethic about, sort of the way I went about my stuff every single day. And like I said, I always just kind of knew like nothing's going to be given to you. You're always going to have to earn it. And then, the reality is the higher up you go, you realize like a lot of guys are just dependent on their talent, dependent on their gifts, and they aren't really hard workers. They're just blessed, with, physical skills. And so, particularly once I got to military school, I realized like that's how I was going to pass guys. That's how I was going to outlast guys, was not, having to depend on my work ethic more so than just some, the ability to jump high or run fast or be, just be physically dominant over people.
So getting into it, I think for this episode, your entire career is so interesting. I think you won at every stop. You were part of some really significant teams, but specifically your history in New Orleans. You're the first player drafted to that franchise when they're in New Orleans. And I would say that you probably were there for the lowest points in franchise history and also some of the highest points. And it happens pretty quickly. So starting in the 2003 draft, obviously everybody knows that draft class is one of the best ever. LeBron James, Carmelo, D. Wade, Chris Bosh, but you're also in that crop. I read that when you were going through your draft process and draft workouts, most of the things that you were hearing were kind of like questions from teams, like how tall you actually are, what position you actually are. And when you got to New Orleans, that was the only team that kind of recognized who you were as a prospect. You had an amazing college career. Walk us through your draft process and your introduction to New Orleans in 2003.
I will tell you, man, it was a difficult process because I was a guy that I was completely under-recruited and overlooked, right? I finished up high school. I left New Jersey, didn't play varsity in New Jersey, so I played freshman basketball and JV basketball as a sophomore. And then my family moved to North Carolina because my grandparents were getting older and were in the last few years of their life. So when I got to North Carolina, I kind of, I was on this weird growth spurt, man. I was about 6 foot, right at 6 foot at the end of my freshman year. Start of my sophomore year, I was 6'4". Start of my junior year, I was like 6'6", 6'7". So I had this, this crazy growth spurt, man, where I just shot up about 6 or 7 inches over the course of 2 seasons. So when I got to North Carolina, I was just looking forward to playing and starting over. But I wasn't getting recruited. My grades weren't great. But the talent, I thought, especially from my perspective, I always felt like I was good enough. But then, I got blessed with a great coach down here, Coach Eddie Gray. He kind of, put his foot in my behind and just made me really chase this thing seriously. Discussing it with my parents, and decided like it was the best thing to go to military school for a year to get that discipline. Play against junior colleges, play against, we played against every military academy, the JV teams for the military academy. So that was a hardening up year for me in terms of just, playing against grown men and older guys, but I got better and I got tougher. But again, I was still kind of under recruited. So I'll never forget it. I was a little down on myself, and we went to this tournament in Maryland. It's called the Charlie Weber. This was when you could still play AAU in the fall. So I go to the Charlie Weber, and there's this coach. I'm on the far court, and there are a bunch of different guys in there, high-level guys who were like on the first few courts, and my game was all on the back court. And I remember walking past all these coaches. Nobody was down at my game. And then, I was having a really good game, and I saw this guy with these glasses, and he poked his head around the curtain. And, I was like, okay, just keep playing, D. I'm telling myself, keep playing. So I was playing well enough that he took a chair and he sat splitting the curtain. So he was recruiting somebody on it to his right, but he was kind of watching me on this court to his left. And I didn't know who he was, didn't know anything about, what program he was from. But after the game, he walks up to me and he goes, hey, listen, I don't have the power to make this official. He said, but I'm almost certain, we want to offer you a scholarship. And I'm like, okay, what school are you from? And he's like, I'm from Xavier. And I had literally never heard of the school before ever. And that was Coach Jeff Battle. And so Coach B started it, and he's like, listen, my head coach is going to come see you as soon as he has a moment. They were obviously getting ready for the season. So I would say maybe about December, Coach Prosser showed up. We were playing at Fork Union, and Coach showed up, saw me play one time live. I'll never forget it. After the game, he walked from the top row of the bleachers, down the bleachers, straight to me and offered me a scholarship.
That's one of the best feelings on the planet.
Time. Yeah, that was one of the first times I felt like, oh, wow, this, like it was validated, So from there, man, I just kind of went on about my business. I dibbled and dabbled with, looking at some other schools, but nobody really wanted me as much as Xavier wanted me. So had a career there, which I'm super proud of. But, when it got to the draft process, because I had flirted with coming out a couple years, so I was getting some notoriety after my sophomore year, and then after my junior year is a little something. So when I decided to come back for my senior year, I'm like, all right, well, the only next stop is the NBA, right? You'll be done with college. So ironically, though, as the draft process started, I started to hear things like, well, he only played that well because he was in a smaller conference. So I'm like, well, damn, y'all were just saying fucking 4 years ago I wasn't good enough to go to y'all conferences. So, how can I, I was just stuck in that mix, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I didn't pay it any mind, but, there were just all these questions about my size. I remember I met the late Mel Daniels. He was with the Pacers, and he came to one of my last games in college, and he walked up to me at right at the locker room door, and he goes, man, you ain't no damn 6'6". Who the hell said? I said, who told you I was 6'6"? It's like, man, that's what everybody thinks. That's why, everybody's like not high on you. And I'm like, nah, man, I don't know, where all that's coming from. So it was just all of these different questions, what position I played. And I'm like, dude, I played power forward my whole college career. There were similar guys, to me who were power forward. So I never understood the questions. And then, so I'll admit, man, I was down throughout most of the recruiting process, because I definitely felt like I was higher, I was a better player. And to a man, I was like, literally, I was like, man, I'm probably the 5th or 6th best prospect in this draft. Just,
And you were
straight up.
Facts.
So
do you guys know why the Hornets moved from Charlotte to New Orleans?
I've heard a lot of
don't. Other than I know they didn't have a lot of fan support.
But they
locally,
did. But if you remember, like 10 years before, Charlotte was like,
with Larry Johnson, yeah,
they were like the most popping thing. But the owner, George Shinn, who ended up selling the team to David Stern in the NBA, they like foreclosed it. He was part of some crazy ass scandals, like it was like a sex kidnapping scandal. He was with a cheerleader, and they basically said, Charlotte as a city was like, we don't want any part of you anymore. So just a quick aside, I don't know if it leaked down to the players at all, but that's why you were drafted by the New Orleans Hornets and not the Charlotte Hornets.
Dylan sent me a couple of articles and it talked about your experience, in the locker room as a free thinker in the NBA. You know what I mean? How you felt almost out of place. You know what I mean? For reading and. You know what I mean? And being upright, you know what I mean? And, standing on yours. That's what you would, that's what, from afar, that's what I always admire about you. Cause I had a similar instance when I came into the NBA. Can you talk to me a little bit about the dynamics about feeling kind of foreign in the locker room during your rookie years? Or did you have good vets and were accepted?
Yeah, so I guess, when I got drafted, so I got going to New Orleans, I went to the oldest team in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
So those guys were done. I mean, in terms of just like the whole rookie hazing. And I mean, I was hearing stories from like what Shaq and them were doing to the rookies in LA. And I'm like, oh yeah, I might have had to go upside somebody's head with a baseball bat.
Facts.
if somebody tried in that stuff with me. So, I had guys like PJ, Steve Smith, Stacey Augmon, George Lynch, Darrell Armstrong, David Wesley, Sean Rooks.
You had like really you had like damn near all the good guys of the NBA on one team. That is completely ridiculous that you could just have 2 of those and be good between the guards and the big guys. You know what I mean? That's a whole team full of like the best. Yeah.
So I got the game honest, bro. Like Stacey Augmon was my vet. PJ was my vet. Like Smitty, they never steered me wrong. Like, it was literally from the day I got there, it was like, young fella, you want to learn how to play 12 to get in the standards, join 12, 15 seasons? We got you. And it was like, do this, do that, and I just followed. I was a copycat. Like Stacey Augmon told me, don't sit up there by the coaches, man. When you're going to play, sit down toward the end of the bench so you can watch the game and understand what's going on in the game and learn these rotations and these assignments. He said, because you sit up there near the coaches, that's where all the gossiping goes on. And so I used to sit down at the end of the bench. And
something as simple as that, D. West. Right. Something as simple as that. Something as simple as that. That's too much noise towards the front of the bench. Right. You got the little assistant on the end whispering in your ear and halfway to. Right. That's free game. Yeah.
Playing politics. And so Ice was like, yo, man, go sit down here with me, young fella. You'll learn the game faster sitting down here. So, and I wasn't playing a whole lot. I was playing about 10, 11 minutes a game as a rookie, maybe. So most of the night I was sitting there watching until somebody got in foul trouble or it was a, different type of matchup or something. So I never felt really isolated in New Orleans, especially with that group. But, it was just some of the smaller stuff as I started to get, as being a 4-year college guy, like I had learned, a lot, and I was applying some of the methodologies that I had learned in college to, my day-to-day life. So I used to read. I was always asking questions, trying to find out, what is what. I, wanted to learn the business of basketball before it even became a thing. I was trying to figure out, like, wait a minute, man, where, how do we get paid? How does all of this work? So my first couple years was all about learning, trying to figure stuff out. And then it wasn't until I got a little bit older, year 3, year 4, year 5, that some of these younger guys started to come in. And that's when I realized, like, wait a minute, like, I'm a little different because I can't have these conversations about, about bitches and drinking. And that just wasn't anything I could spend a whole lot of time on. So it would isolate me at times, right? I knew how to hang out and stay cool with my guys, but in terms of like conversation and what I chose to do, like I would go to, when we would land in certain cities, man, I'm finding the best bookstores. I'm going to the museum sometimes, you know what I'm saying? I might go to, catch a show whatever, just doing stuff that wasn't necessarily the typical get to the city, get drunk, let's go to the club.
Trying to get the real culture of the city, the real vibes. Those are where the real vibes are. You know what I mean? And now that I used to do a lot of the same. If it wasn't shopping, you know what I mean? It was like a local bookstore, record store, little mom and pop stops. You know what I mean? Where you can actually get the feel of the city. That's interesting. I did it a lot.
I think.
Go ahead.
I feel like it's not too different than like high school or anything. Like, do you notice a lot of players in the NBA kind of fall victim to like trying to be somebody that they're not, because they're not, like, people might be looking at you funny or talking, but it takes kind of a strong-willed person to just be themselves and not care about what anybody else is saying to them. Do you see oftentimes in the NBA people kind of going into situations and just kind of merging in with the group just so they can quote unquote fit in and be somebody that they're really not?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, especially for guys who had to do that. And I think, when I was coming through, like we were legit enemies with other guys. Like, we weren't friends. Like, I didn't grow up being friends with the guys I was competing against, right? Like, I wasn't friends with Jameer Nelson in college, and so when I was competing, trying to beat Jameer every year in college, and so it wasn't like now, or even, a few years before I got out of the NBA, a lot of these guys are friends, and they're friends from childhood. And so the competitiveness is not there. But then also it's like the idea that I've got to relate to this dude in a different kind of way and connect with him in a different kind of way that isn't, that isn't what most of us were used to in terms of like, we're not shaking hands after the game. We're not hugging and all this other stuff that goes on after the games. Now, like just a regular season game, we weren't doing that. We weren't brought up that way. So I think a lot of guys are just being themselves because they've always kind of had the buddy relationship. Like, I'm going to go out here and not play defense against you. You not play defense against me. We'll both look good. And so, you see a lot of guys who just conform, right? So they come in the league and they're like, okay, everybody else is doing it, I'm going to do it. When I came in the NBA, it was like the big car era. So it was Mercedes everywhere, it was big cars. Mm-hmm. And I remember like PJ pulled up in this Navigator, and PJ had this crack through his Navigator. I'm going, what you doing, man? Like, Wes, it gets me here. And I was like, I respect that, man.
Facts.
So, just again, some of that stuff, again, it's some of the guys fall victim to it because they're in environments where they don't have the veteran leadership. Yep. They don't have guys to like tell them or set an example for them. And yeah, you do have guys, like I saw guys in New Orleans, right? They come in and they're completely clueless about what they have to do to make the team. They're completely, what they think about themselves and what role they should be playing on the team is completely in left field versus what, the team is looking for from them and looking for what they can do or bring to the team. These guys will come in and be like, man, I'm competing with Chris Paul. I'm like, fool, no, you're not. Like, what's wrong with you, man? You're trying to you're trying to earn the 13th spot on this team, man, and be on the team and start making a name for yourself. But a lot, again, when the guys don't have that sense of, don't have a good background in terms of what they are and who they are, they've always tried to fit in instead of just having an identity that they believe in or completely confident in what they are inside. You get guys who come to the league and they conform. They do what everybody else is doing. Smitty told me once, he said, is it more important to be, is in your career, is it more important for you to be what you want to be or be what this team needs you to be? You know what I mean?
Profound. Like,
if you do, or if you are what the team needs you to be, you're going to get paid. You're going to have a job. You're going to be, but if you trying to be what you want to be, hey man, you and you're not Kobe, LeBron, Mike, or KG or somebody like that, then you're gonna find a harder path.
Facts.
It's an interesting dynamic between that, and then you could probably make the argument for guys that only made it because they thought of themselves, like the irrational confidence guy. Sometimes it works.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
you're right. Because we all have to get there.
Yeah.
Because at some point you have to have irrational confidence to compete against some of these guys. But I think it's more so like it has to be believable.
Yeah, that's
right.
True.
And it has to make sense, especially if you say it out loud.
You can't shoot. You can't.
That's what I used to say about when guys would come into camp and think they're competing against CP. Right? It's like, nah, bro, you're missing the point.
You can't shoot a cannon from a canoe.
Right.
At the end of the day.
So your first 2 years, your rookie year, you guys go to the playoffs. Like you said, you're observing a lot from the bench, but that's an amazing 7-game first-round series. Baron Davis, kind of in his last hurrah for the Hornets, going toe-to-toe with Dwayne Wade, your fellow 2003 draft member. What are your biggest memories of that series, seeing BD and D Wade go back and forth?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. I'm almost positive that we played the Heat 4 times in the regular season, 7 times in the playoffs, and twice in the preseason.
Damn.
So we had played each other an unreasonable amount of times that year. So we were super familiar with each other. And, that was, again, it was one of those things where we knew we had a chance to beat them. They had a chance to beat us. We knew it was going to come down to whichever team kind of could put together the best 4, 5, 6 minutes in a decisive game. And that's when, D Wade really had, he had a lot of confidence. He was in a situation where they were basically looking for him to be the guy. And he had some moments in that playoff series, but we had played each other so many times that season because we were still in the East in New Orleans. So we were, we knew exactly who they were. They knew who we were. They just had a little bit more than we had. But that was a great, for me, it was a great experience because I got to see these older guys compete. I got to see them sort of that step that you have to take as the season winds down.
And to go to the playoffs, I was thinking about that. You got to see that.
Yeah, being able to
switch.
see them do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Being able to see them do that. We probably would have finished that year probably in the top 3 had Mashburn not gotten hurt. We lost. People realized we didn't have Jamal Mashburn most of that season.
Yeah.
Because he was dealing with that knee that ultimately, ended his career. But if we have Mash, we probably get through that series with no problem.
He was showing signs trying to fight through that knee. I thought he was going to come back for a minute too.
That's a microfracture guy.
Yeah, for a minute.
Yeah. He tried.
He retired right after that. I think he was an all-star. He was averaging like 20 points a game, and then he retired. Like he didn't even.
I'm telling you, bro, because
I
I feel like he did, and he looked like Mash, but it probably took him. He probably went through hell and back to get there. He probably was like, "I'm cool," because he was never healthy that whole year. And even when he came back, it was like him trying to test it. And it was just, he couldn't do it. And then I remember that following summer, we were kind of checking in, trying to see what he was going to do. And he's like, D West, I can't even walk around Disneyland without this thing messing up. Cause he had taken his daughter somewhere. So he was like, we knew he was done. But that impacted that year too. Because if we had Mash, it's probably a different outcome to that series and that whole season. Yeah.
We didn't even mention Mash in the list of super vets. He's like a damn near billionaire now. He's got all the what
Mash
is he? He's franchising. He's a junior Bridgman.
He's
right? He's got all the fast food.
Yeah.
He's got
Burger King, real estate, Mash doing it all.
Mash does a lot. And he was a hell of a player too. So
come on now, one of the forgotten ones, low key. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Even in college, he was a bucket in college. He was one of my favorite players watching him at Kentucky. After your rookie year, Tim Floyd got fired. You know what I mean? There's been, I don't know how you like Tim Floyd as a coach, but Byron Scott comes in. OG B Scott comes in, and I heard some stories about B Scott and some of the regimen and the things he used to do in training camp. And practices and other things of that sort. Did you like that? I know you coming from Hargrave, D West, what I mean? And Coach
nobody played for B Scott longer. I played for B Scott longer than anybody.
Liked it. I was like, I think D. We was talking about it pre-show. I was like, man, I think D West liked that shit though, man. Yeah.
I rock with Coach, man. I rock with Coach. It was with Coach Floyd, man. It was a tough situation because he's coming in as this kind
brainiac,
of college energy coach, man. And I knew it was an issue because he was just up against a locker room that just had way more basketball.
Wait a minute, was he trying to bring the triangle in there, or had he let that go by then?
No, it just was that you're coming to the oldest team in the NBA
with that college vigor.
with the college enthusiasm, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
that ain't gonna work. And the guys just never, because they knew it all. Like, you trying to show Stacey Augmon how to close out, and nah, man, it's more so like, you know, how do you like to do? Like, I learned this, right? Like, when you got guys like that who basically mastered this stuff, so it's more so, here's the scheme we want to try to introduce. What do you think about it, Stacey? Like, what do you think about it, Smitty? Like, that's the way that group should have been coached. PJ, what's the best way? Not coming in trying to, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Like, nah, G. Lynch played for Dean Smith.
Stop it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was on, I think he was with the Philly, the 76ers when Iverson took him to the finals. So, you know, he's got like Larry Brown, Dean Smith in his background. Like, come on, man.
Steve Smith played for a legendary college coach and some legendary coaches too.
Yeah, he was at Michigan State. I mean, all these guys had immense basketball. Oh, Bryce Drew was on that team as well, right? So Bryce was like a little coach then, you know. So it was just a lot. So it was a lot for Tim. I've always said it was just, that environment was tough for him, especially coming after, you know, his time in Chicago. So when we got B. Scott. B. Scott was clear with them old dudes. He was like, y'all, you know, it's over for y'all. Like, we're going to transition this thing. We're going to go younger. Yeah,
like I'm about to run y'all out the gym. Like, I'm about to move y'all, or I'm about to break. I'm coming here. We're going to break some of y'all. The ones who can stay. Okay, cool. We'll see what you got.
And he wasn't like harsh with it. It was more so like, we've got to rebuild this team. And we're going to rebuild it in a way with a style that's faster and more up tempo, because we were moving to the Western Conference, which was all about scoring. And
that's a tough move.
It is.
Yeah,
talk about a tough move.
So we, you know, he had to come in, and you know, we started, you know, trading away guys, and you know, we just sort of admitted that year was going to be a rebuilding year. You know, I had got hurt that my second year when Coach first came in. I was only available for like the first maybe 10 or 11 games. And then I had a bad knee injury that knocked me down for about 55, 60 games. And so, you know, I got a chance to watch a lot of guys go through what we knew was going to be the future. But Coach came in with just a different mindset. He was going to show us, especially once we reset and everybody was young, he's going to show us how to work, how to be pros, you know, how to go after it every single day. Just a lot of that clear language. Like, listen, man, we're only going to be in here from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, man. You got the rest of your day to do what you want to do. But when you come in here, we're going to work. And he got it out of us. You know what I'm saying? We drafted CP year 3, my third year, which was CP's rookie year. We had to leave New Orleans because of Katrina. But, you know, Coach Scott was just, you know, the staffs he put together with a lot of veteran coaches. I've got very fortunate, man. I never was on a bad staff in terms of like coaching and atmosphere and environment. So, you know, a lot of my success in the NBA came from just having the luck, getting the luck of the draw, man. Like getting guys like when Phil Jackson took his brief hiatus from Chicago, one of his top assistants, Jim Clemens, came to New Orleans. So I had JC for two seasons, right? So he's pouring into me all this stuff from Chicago, and you know, got Kenny Gaddison and Darryl Walker. Like Darryl Walker had played with MJ, played with the Knicks, and you know, Gat was a longtime old school vet. Just a lot of high quality coaches and guys who could, you know, throw information at me that I needed.
So you mentioned that move to Katrina. The storm hits, I think, on the same day as your birthday, which is crazy. Yeah. And you've said that the whole Katrina experience kind of really like changed your outlook on life. It happens a month before training camp. It's a scramble to figure out where you guys are going to play. You go to Oklahoma City like during training camp, but you don't know how long you're going to be there. I assume you can't get back to wherever your house or apartment is in New Orleans. So walk us back to those first days. Like you show up in Oklahoma City, you're all in a long-term stay hotel. Like what do you remember from that whole period?
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting because we thought we were going to Louisville.
Okay.
And then we thought we were going to Louisville because there was like an arena there or something. They were looking for places that had arenas. And then, you know, maybe like literally in like the 25th hour, they're like, nah, we're going to Oklahoma. We're like, what? They're like, yeah, they've literally got the most NBA ready arena. And it was like, you know, the folks are saying that they can support an NBA franchise. So we're like, whatever. They fly us out there. We go to this hotel, and the entire organization is being run out of a hotel. I mean, the front office was in the hotel. The whole organization. We rented out the entire hotel, and we were there for 2-3 months. It wasn't until November, December that we all kind of got out of the hotel and people find places to live in the community. So it was
What
like
hotel? Was it a nice hotel?
it was literally an extended stay. It wasn't some.
It wasn't Superfly, Fly Liberace of Oklahoma. No.
Those weren't there yet. They weren't there yet.
It wasn't developed like that yet. It wasn't used to the NBA. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, it was not there yet. So we were staying in literally like just some extended stay hotel with, and the franchise had the entire thing. So we're doing that. We were practicing at a D3 school, I believe.
Nah, that should be against the collect CBA. there should be some CBA flags in there. The extended stay, D3, so there should be some CBA flag. But continue, D West. My bad.
I knew good. We were there practicing at that small school, and we just we knew things were going to be okay because I'll tell you, the first time we had a fan. Coach got us practicing and stuff like that. And then they're like, yo, we want to introduce the team to the city, right? And so I had gone through 2 of these events in the NBA in New Orleans. And so max, it was like a few hundred people. You get the kids. That's typically what it is. Man, we went to that arena. Man, it was maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people in there. We couldn't believe it.
Okay.
We could not believe it.
Okay.
And then it went from 5,000 or 6,000 people to by like opening night, man, it was rocking it. And that place was rock. I mean, it was almost like the people were trying to prove that they could support a franchise. You know what I'm saying? And they had so much energy. They were welcoming of us. It was kind of funny, man. I heard KD say something about they're responsible for bringing basketball to Oklahoma or some shit like that. And I'm like, man, y'all be remembering history. We were the first team there. We were the team that made it possible, right? Like we were there. We were on the ground before anybody knew that OKC could support a franchise. We were there playing. The fans were great. The people in the community were great. They made sure that it was like you all came here. We're going to show you why we need a franchise. And so we weren't there a month. Literally, the season hadn't gone through a month, and there were already whispers about the people in Oklahoma trying to buy our team. They were trying to buy the franchise. They were trying to buy New Orleans. And so the whole time we were there, 2 years we were there, that was always right there, like under the surface. Like, are we going back to New Orleans? Are we staying in OKC? The people in OKC, like nobody knew about Chesapeake or Devon Energy, but those folks like some of the largest independent oil and gas companies, right, in the country. So they've got big money. They're like, nah, we can afford this team. If you don't want to give us this team, we're gonna find a team. They were very adamant about making sure that the NBA was in Oklahoma. So that was a great time for us because that was where we grew up. That was where Coach Scott basically gave CP the keys and, was really trying. He put that battery in my back like, man, you got to go after this thing. I need you to be this every single day. And he really was the one, him along with, Gat and JC and D-Walk just really kept their foot on us, man, in terms of just showing us how to be professionals and how to get it done on a consistent basis.
Hey, but D West, was it because of that environment that you guys could lock in and subscribe to what B Scott was telling me? You got CP3 coming in from Wake Forest. You're almost in like a college environment. You don't have the accoutrements of the four seasons with the poppin' city and restaurants in the background. Really, you got Chili's at best. Maybe a mom and pop, you know what I mean, bar and grill. Did that environment in OKC with the mixture of what CP3 coming in and as a rookie and you without, with your vet, did that foster, you know what I mean, that great what you had initially built in OKC before you eventually moved on to New Orleans?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was a combination of all of that. We needed the energy that those fans had, because we were outmatched most nights. Like, I'm not going, like, our rosters were not great. And so it was literally, we're going to play hard and with a whole bunch of effort. You know, when the big dogs came in, like we beat Miami in there that year when they won the championship that year, and we whooped them at home. And Pat Riley he called the whole environment unprofessional. He was so pissed because the people were loud. I mean, they were, you know, usually during the NBA it's quiet during timeouts, and they were loud during timeouts. They were loud at the jump ball. They were and he was, this whole environment is unprofessional. He was mad. He wouldn't sign.
Hey, that's saying something from Pat, because Pat been in the LA Boston series in Beantown in the 80s. That's saying Pat might have been getting a little soft by then, man.
Maybe. Yeah. But I just remember he was disgusted with the type of environment that it was, because it was a college atmosphere. It was very loud, raucous. You know, the fans were just cheering. I mean, they were excited during the halftime show. It was never that NBA quiet. No, you know, once the game starts, about 20 minutes into the game is when the game starts, and they never bought into that from day one. So that environment really helped us thrive. It helped us create an identity for ourselves moving forward.
That whole history of the, because you're right, that is why the Thunder exist, and then they don't end up buying the Hornets. They go up swiping the Sonics. So that whole history is really interesting. Quick question. Do you still have your Oklahoma City Valentine's Day jersey, that red one? And did you know that that's like probably the most sought after jersey from resellers ever? Like those things go for like 50 G's. That red Oklahoma City. Yes, the red Oklahoma City.
I have it. I have mine. Wow. I did not know that.
I'll take 5% of that sale as a broker. Yeah, that red OKC Valentine's Day jersey is like the white whale for those reselling freaks.
Wow. Okay. All right. Now I know exactly. I actually know where it is too.
Okay. So, all right.
I did not know that.
Well, I'll send you my Zelle. Yeah. So that you end up going back to New Orleans full-time 2008. Real quick before we talk about the power forward, Jelani, is there anything to read into, like when you went back to New Orleans those first times, like in 2006 when the city was still a disaster, like was it just like weird? I mean, I assume you're going into the city and like half the shit is probably still like destroyed, and they're trying to, and they're like half the city's gone. Nobody has their homes, and they're trying to like basically manufacture ticket sales and prove to the NBA that like New Orleans, no, we're good. We can still hold up a franchise. But meanwhile, like the city's destroyed. It took like 5 years for them to probably still not even fully built back up.
Right. Yeah. No, it was tough because I think when we went back and played a few games each of those 2 seasons. So the first season there might have been only like 3, and then maybe the next year it was 6. So I know they doubled or tripled or something, but we would go back and be the home team, but we were both away teams basically in essence. It was one of those things where you go back and like we still see the water lines, like where the water was sitting on the buildings. Like that was probably the most just kind of one of the most eye-popping things about it is when, you got around the city, you saw where the water lines were still very present. Even by the time we went back and the NBA All-Star game was there, the water lines were still there. The tent city, the people living under the freeway was still there. Obviously, Lakeside and some of the Ninth Ward, the areas that never got rebuilt were completely destroyed. We did some tours. We did a lot of charity work even before we left. I remember we went back in, I was with PJ when we went back into New Orleans, maybe it might've been a month and some change after Katrina. So they had evacuated as many people as they could, but then as the humanitarian aid and stuff started to come in, we flew into Baton Rouge and then made our way down to New Orleans, for some charity stuff. We had gone into Mississippi to do some stuff where people were displaced. So it was a different experience. It definitely changed a lot of my perspective about life and about the immediacy of fame and fortune, and how helpless you can be, even with access and even with resources, because it was such an impactful moment for that city. I mean, people's everything, folks lost every single thing. And for us, right, it was like, okay, well, we'll let go of the furniture, but we have careers. Some of these folks, were never able to get back on solid footing. So when we went back, we were always, we had the city and the life of the city in mind. And then when we ultimately returned for good, we were like, we took that on. It's like, okay, we're going to be a part of one of the things that makes folks proud to be from New Orleans, proud to be back in New Orleans. Like that was one of the things that we carried for us as we made our way back into the city.
Before we get into the 2007, 2008 season, you were still in the golden age of power forwards at this time. I mean, a couple of names, you got Timmy, Dirk, KG, Paul, Boozer, Amari, Zachary. That's damn near everybody. Now, I'm not even going, I'm not, you know what I mean, in various degrees of their career and development, you know what I mean? This is when they're still adding tools to their bag and, Amari's, adding, it's just, it's golden age of power forwards. I know you don't have a lot of the accolades, and do you take that over the battles that you had of them? Does that sit better with you knowing that you survived in those battles and succeeded in the golden age of power forwards? Over you were like a 12-time All-Star and 50,000 points, whatever the metric is to be successful as a power forward. Do you take your career during the golden age over accolades as it sits right now today, or how do you think about that as you retire?
Yeah, well, I do take a lot of pride in it wasn't that I was necessarily gunning for those all-star seasons, but I do take pride in the fact that I was able to get, become an all-star amidst all of these, tremendously talented guys at my position. We didn't have a night off, bro. I didn't have a night off.
Zero.
There was no night off at the power forward position for a few years there. And then once LaMarcus came in, it was like, God, dog, like it's not going to stop. Because you got to remember, C. Webb was still, even though he was on one knee, he was still
dangerous. 20. He was still dangerous.
And Sharif was the same way in Sacramento. Like Sharif was still a handful. The last couple years of his career. Obviously Sheed and guys like that, KG, Dirk, but guys like Luis Scola, Jawan Howard, Mehmet Okur, Carlos Boozer, and Paul Millsap were all on the same team.
Facts.
Like Millsap was coming off the bench.
That was annoying. That Utah.
So it was like,
yeah.
AK, right? Andre Kirilenko. It was a lot.
Yeah.
There were a lot of guys. And so, the fact that I was able to, set myself apart, not get overwhelmed, because a lot of careers were killed. A lot of guys came in at that position.
How did you set yourself apart, D West? I got my own notions. I believe it was that damn mid-range 17-foot footer. You had a lot of bouncy people that you can. I remember the D West shit. You could play with your eyes and get you up out of your toes a little bit.
Right.
And you had you almost was big doggish where you can react within a fake and decide whether you're going to shoot or not.
Shoot, right.
You know what I mean? I know that about you from 15 and 17. You face up, you know what I mean? Right. You're looking at feet and you can react within your face whether you're going to shoot. Was that your main weapon, the mid-range game is a lost art, whether it be through the point guard, the wings, or now the big man. We got the Sheed, we got the big man out here shooting threes now, D West. You seem to have eaten very well during your career off the mid-range game.
So I'll take you back. So the reason why I started shooting jump shots, I was not a jump shooter coming into
the elbow.
Never. I scored. Listen, bro. I scored over 2,000 points in college, and I would literally bet that 1,900 of them were within 8 feet. Like I was all at the rim, back to the basket. I could beat you off the bounce, but everything was at the rim. And then my second year, I got hurt. And I got hurt because I wasn't listening. So I would listen to all of the vets. And Darryl Armstrong.
What did you get hurt? Was it the knee?
My second year.
Was it the knee?
So it was my knee. But I'll tell you. So Darryl Armstrong, my whole rookie year, said, David D. West, you got to shoot the ball. I wouldn't shoot it. You got to shoot that ball, young fella. The reason why I got hurt against the Pistons. And it was a play. Somebody dumped it off to me, and I should have shot the ball, right? And I heard Larry Brown behind me. And, if you've ever played in a game with these older coaches, they coaching everybody. They coaching their team, coaching you. So I hear him as I go to drive and get fouled. I hear Coach Brown specifically say, you should have shot that ball, Wes. And in my mind, I go to the free throw like, man, he's another one. He's another one, man, telling me to shoot the ball. I don't shoot the ball. 2 possessions later, same type of play, and I go to the basket, and I get completely destroyed. Ben one side, Tayshaun another side, Rashid the other side. 55 games I missed. It was that play. And if I had shot the ball, I wouldn't have got hurt. So at the end of that season, Kenny Gaddison, who's the coach, one of my assistants, Kenny comes up to me and he says, David, you ever watch Karl Malone? And I'm not a Karl Malone fan at all. I go, nah. He said, well, if you want to have an NBA career, you need to watch Karl Malone. So Gat he literally handed me a stack of CDs of Karl Malone's best games from 90, 95, 96, 96, 97. He handed like a stack this big of those games. And then he handed me the Western Conference semifinals, Western Conference finals, and the NBA finals against the Bulls. And he said, D West, go watch these tapes. And Gat would check in throughout the summer. You watching them tapes? So I started watching. And I realized, like, man, Karl Malone, that's all he shot was 15 to 17-foot jumpers, man. But like we saw on TV, all we saw was the dunk, right? Was him dunking and running the lane. But the majority of his buckets were jumpers. And so that summer, I was like, okay, I'm going to just start catching and shooting. And I talked to CP because, he played for Coach Prosser at Wake Forest. So we had, we were communicating before, and we had met each other before he was drafted. But that summer we drafted him, I had already kind of reshaped how I was going to play. And it was before we knew he was even coming to the team. I had basically been given those instructions from Gat to like, you got to be able to shoot this ball when you're open. And so, my numbers almost doubled. I don't know what I averaged my third year, but it went way up literally because I was just willing to shoot the jumper. And it wasn't a whole lot of crazy work. It was just getting in the gym, making 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 shots.
See, that's the shit I remember when you was cracking and when the jumper went out. I was like, when did West start doing all this? And then I started hearing about the story. Well, he was shooting 800 jumpers a day for 4 months and all that. I was like, oh, well, that tends to happen when you put in that much work. Why do you think the mid-range game has disappeared, D West? Because it seems to be at the biggest moments of the game. Playoffs, championship, big shots throughout NBA history, they tend to be the mid-range. Why do you think it's ignored? Why do you think it'll never go anywhere? And can you just speak to the importance of the mid-range game and like specifically in like the postseason?
Yeah. Did it pain you in your heart when you start hearing coaches and talking heads saying, well, mid-range is the worst shot in the game. You only shoot threes and layups.
Yeah, it's bad. And I would just say that part of it is, I think, there's a tendency to want to make things less complicated. And I think from a coaching standpoint, that's kind of the world that we're in now in basketball is these coaches just want it to be less complicated. So that's why you don't see a whole lot of defensive strategizing. Everybody just switches because the coaches just don't want to deal with whether or not this guy can figure out this coverage, man, just switch it. And so it's like, we'll just draft guys that can switch everything and to hell with defense. So that's why the scoring numbers are astronomical. But I also think that offensively, it's just an easier way to play, right? Because there are guys, just because you shoot threes doesn't mean you should be shooting threes. I watch games every night where there are guys who should not be shooting threes. And there are guys shooting 25, 30% from the three, and they're still chucking them up because, the numbers say like that's the best shot and all this other stuff. But more importantly for me, I think it just takes away the different styles of basketball that can be played.
The different patterns, you're eliminating a couple of patterns that are
everybody
dope.
plays the same.
Yeah.
So I think part of the mid-range is like, it changes the way that the game is played. It's a legit, because you watch Kawhi Leonard still plays in the mid-range.
Durant,
you watch in the playoffs, right? In the playoffs when things are on the line, guys are taking best available shot. They're not necessarily Jokic. They're not necessarily hunting the three, which they do the majority of the regular season. It's also a copycat league. And once everybody, again, we talked about conformity earlier, right? I think a lot of these teams have just conformed. They've just given into the idea that, it's easier to just coach guys up and say, hey, run to the corner, shoot threes, come set a pick and roll. If you can't get to the rim, throw it out and you shoot the three. And so it makes the game a little less exciting. And it makes it a little less nuanced because, again, when you've got a team, so when I remember my time in Indiana, before everybody started just switching and playing the same way, there were different styles of play, right? We played a certain way. Memphis played a certain way. Dallas was playing a certain kind of way. The Warriors' way wasn't necessarily set because Mark Jackson was still there, but like the Spurs played their kind of way. And then, you had the Knicks who played a certain kind of way. Like there was different styles of play, right? Now it's all the same style of play, right? And that's what sort of changed the dynamic. That's why the mid-range game is not, you don't see it anymore. It's because it's a different style. Everybody plays the same style of play. I mean, guys get trapped, bro. Like they run. Guys are getting trapped in the half. They're playing zone.
Facts.
Like you couldn't play zone when I was in the NBA because you had a threat at the rim. You had guys who would shoot, but now guys are only going to shoot threes, so you can play zone. You can trap guys out front, and it's just a different style. It's just a different game, and they've done it in a way that's eliminated the nuance to the game and some of the variety that you could have in basketball.
Speaking of nuances, D West, let's get into it. Let's get a little technical for a power forward. I consider you were known to be, good, both offensively and defensively. What does a mid-range shot do to a good defender? If I'm a good defender, I'm bouncy. I'm long. You already know I'm bouncy. You know what I mean? I can pin it on the floor. I can move laterally. What does a good mid-range do from the four? You know what I mean? We can specifically talk as big man. We won't talk about for wing player. We'll just talk about for a big, for if you want to be good as a big and a good scorer, what does a good midi do for you offensively against a good bouncy defender that can switch off and do all these things that you're talking about?
Right. It keeps them honest. That's the first thing. It keeps them honest. It gives you a catch and shoot well within your range. So if you right off the elbow. So if I catch the ball off the elbow, if you don't close out to me hard, I'm letting it go.
Facts.
If you close out to me hard, I get my shoulder down. Now I'm one or two dribbles away from a rim attack. Also, the mid-range puts you in best. For me, it was always being a passer from that spot. So now I've got better angles to hit the corner, that I can play with my big who's under the basket, and I can also find guys on the perimeter, right? So now when you look at a game, that part of the floor is wide open.
Facts.
Like there's literally often nobody occupying those areas. So again, like I said, it makes teams easier to guard because you don't have those specific spots filled. Like you don't have anybody playing the elbow. You don't have anybody playing sort of that out, I guess a step, we call it the Malone post, which was, remember that long trapezoid line that they would draw sometimes on the court. A step or two outside of that is a mid-range post catch. You can face up, shoot it, a couple of dribbles, even if a double comes, there's still enough room to move it. It just changes the dynamics, but I think it makes you, especially if you're a guy who can knock that shot down, it just always makes you a threat to the defense.
Technical lesson. That Larry Brown story is crazy. It's like the old dude who maybe tells you something you don't want to hear, but deep down
savant.
He knows he right. Yeah, that's crazy.
Right, and he was the opposing team coach.
Yeah,
but they used to be like that. Those like Don Nelson was that way too. Like he'd be coaching his team, but like if he saw you make a mistake, he'd be like, "Hey man, don't do that."
They can't help it.
Yeah, they can't help it. Right.
Hey, what's dope? I want to real quick, Dylan, what's dope? I'm telling you, back then, D West is absolutely right. Even in the runs in the summer, like if you weren't comfortable with your little 15-footer and you pass it up, they'd be on you. They'd be like, "Hey, you got to shoot that." Because he going to the rim and he doing this, and we'll like for the science of the whole thing, you start to learn as a pro, there's just some shots you have to shoot, that you have to get better at, that you have to learn to develop, but they will be on your ass, whether it's a coach or opposing coach, what it is, because like you said, them dudes be thinking about like injuries. No, they
Right.
already crashed into the rim. He already going back this way. You just have to shoot it, son. You know what I mean? So
Right.
just
You
to go
gotta
back
take
to
that shot.
go back to OGs and
Right.
basketball savants. Go ahead, Dylan.
So the 2008 season, your first full season back in New Orleans, 56 wins. It's the best season in Hornets Pelicans history to this day. You said that there was kind of a symbolism of bringing the city back together, giving them hope. Not to discredit, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. I think Chris Paul probably wins that MVP if Kobe didn't have 0 MVPs at that time. Speak to us about how good Chris Paul was. I think that's his probably 4th year in the league or 3rd year in the league. He's incredible. The kind of dual pick and roll that he had with Tyson at the rim and then popping with you. How good was Chris Paul? And we see today kind of the death of the true point guard, but that dude epitomizes that to the fullest. And he was nasty that year. So give us a couple minutes on how good Chris Paul was and what your relationship was like with him.
Yeah, like I said, I knew C before he came to the Hornets. And, Coach Prosser was super high on him, just loved him to death and felt like he was one of the – he's like, he used to say, Davey, he's gonna change things for you guys. I'm telling you. And I say, Coach, I hope so, man. We're trying to win, trying to get better. But, when C came in, he just had that youthful energy. Probably one of the – before, obviously the NBA seasons, it takes a toll on you. But, his first 2 years, I don't think I've ever played with somebody that fast. He had so many tricks and, there's one thing I've never seen another guy do this ever. And it might be hard for me to explain it, but just imagine you're dribbling the ball and he's chasing you. He would tap you on the opposite side to make you think that's where he was. And as soon as you switch the ball to that hand, he would take it. Unbelievable, man. Yeah. Never seen anybody do it. Yeah. To this day, I haven't seen guys been able to pull it off. And he did it multiple times his rookie year. And then obviously, the NBA gets hip to it. So, nobody's playing around with him anymore in that way. But he just came in the league with a determination to play, to compete, to not let his size be a factor. He was in practice every day. We had to, we were young and, again, I was in my 3rd year, but this was like my first full-time year as a starter, somebody who's going to be counted on. So we had to learn how to practice even when, Coach Scott was kicking our butts. We had to figure out how to get through it and then be able to perform in the games. And CP just bought in from day one. Like there was a certain way that coach wanted us to play, which was fast. We did some of the Princeton stuff, but more so he was like, let's get 35, 40 pick and rolls in a game, which was a lot then. And then we just kept up in the ante, more and more every time, especially as he gave Chris more freedom. He gave Chris more freedom to be the leader on offense.
Does Chris Paul, should he be brought up in that kind of tier A point guard defender conversation with the likes of a Gary Payton and a Jason Kidd? Because accolades wise, he's right there with him.
Yeah, definitely. And it was the way he was doing it. He was doing getting passing lane steals on the ball. So he'd be guarding the ball. Crazy. And he was fast enough that a guy would pass the ball and he could get in the passing lane from on the ball and steal it like he was an off-ball defender. So, and then he also, he's very competitive. And so his competitiveness kept him in the fight against bigger guards, kept him in the fight when teams were, because at one point folks were saying, he can't shoot, so make him go under. Then he can knock down that mid-range pretty proficiently as well. So, what he was and who he was, right, ultimately put him at the upper echelon of the point guard position. And he made everybody, when you were on the floor with him, his only thing was, right, he was an assist hunter. Like CP hunted assists. So you want to play with a guy that's looking to hunt, to make passes, to get guys open shots.
For sure.
Facts. Spurs series. You ended up putting up 30 balls with a damn near broken back.
If my back doesn't go out, bro, we run through them. We beat them. We probably pushed the Lakers to 6 because I think we had won the season series against the Lakers that year. We were as confident as any in our ability to beat anybody in the NBA that year. There was absolutely no fear of us matching up with anybody at any point. Then that season.
D West,
and I've said
I gotta not to cut you off, but I got a horrible back. How did you get through that series with a bad back? Was you?
Man.
Are you doing the usual Toradol or NBA whatever out the NBA cabinet to get the job done? Everything. Yep.
Everything. Yep. My back. It was just a combination of I got hit a couple times, and then maybe it was game 6 because my back it started bothering me about game 3, and we're trying to manage it, and then I had a bad during our shoot around before game 5. It went out completely.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, that was the best game I've ever had in my career.
That's what happened to me one time.
38? So 38, 38, 40?
Just statistically, it was. But I remember that moment because they wanted to shut the trainer and our physical therapist wanted to shut me down because they didn't know sort of how close my vertebrae was, because I was getting the zingers down my leg. So
the hands going,
and I've actually never seen footage of that game. I don't know what happened to the footage of that game, game 5 against the Spurs. And I always laugh because it was like maybe it was some liability thing, but like I literally probably should not have played. Because every time I took a step, I could feel just a sharp down in my leg. My foot went numb a couple times. But we tried. Like I was in a full ice bath. They came to my house. Mark came by the house to like treat me during the middle of the night the next day. It was intensive stuff just to get me through that series. Then after that series, man, if you find a video or a picture of me the next season, I was sitting on a physio ball. I couldn't sit on a hard chair for about a year and a half.
Jesus.
I couldn't sit on the toilet. No deep. So I couldn't sit on an NBA bench. I was bouncing on a physio ball when I would come out of the game. I would be icing literally for the majority of the time I was in hotels, and it took me about a year and a half to really get past that with just physical therapy, no surgery. Listening to some holistic doctors and doing some different things with my posture. I was able to make it through that, but it took me about a year and a half. And then I'll never forget when I got to Indiana, and Indiana does, they're one of the best medical staffs in the league. So when you go to Indiana, Josh and Carl, they're the ones that caught Levert's cancer. So because of the intense screening that Josh and those guys do of the body. So when they looked at my back, they were like, because I was coming off an ACL, they're like, man, the hell with your ACL. That back is worse than that knee. And so the whole time I was there, it's something, if you got back problems, it's something you got to manage every single day. But they really did a good job of getting me under control, because my back would still flare up. I'd have to put like a 5, almost like a 2-gallon bag of ice on my back just to keep this thing keep it
afloat, just to keep it stationary and keep it afloat.
Hey,
but only to go out there and mess.
If I don't hurt my back, we get past the Spurs. I tell you that.
Okay.
Hey, speaking of not sitting on the bench, I think maybe that's why I think you might be the only player in NBA history to get a tech from the bike.
Right.
That was later on.
Right.
Talking about the just the last thing we got on the Hornets, then just closing it out. So you losing 7 to that series, you said that the team probably didn't realize how hard it was to even get to game 7 of a round 2. The next year, obviously there's a lot going on with ownership. That Tyson Chandler voided trade, I think, is one of the most sneaky what ifs ever. It killed your team, but also if Tyson Chandler goes to the Thunder, he doesn't go to the Mavs. The Mavs probably don't win the championship. But the craziest part about that voided trade is he gets traded to the Thunder, and they cancel the trade because of a medical on his toe. And the Thunder team doctor is the same doctor that did the surgery a year before. The doctor who operated on his toe is the same dude that looked at him a year later and said, whoever did that toe didn't do a good job. We can't do the trade. So he gets traded to the Thunder. Then they say, nah, never mind. He's got to go back to the ex-girlfriend's house and stay
Right,
there
right.
for the rest of the lease.
Mhm.
And the team
Right.
just kind of never gets the same. So that to me is kind of, everybody talks about the canceled trade with the Lakers for Gasol, but that one is arguably like a bigger swing.
Yeah, that killed us because we love Tyson.
Yeah.
We wanted Tyson when he was in Chicago. So bringing Tyson, like we were like, man, we just need Tyson. What happened was there, and this is what you learn when you get older, is that if the front office and the coaching philosophies are not tied together, it's a disaster waiting to happen. So the front office had an idea of how they wanted us to play and how they wanted their center to be versus what we knew what we needed as the guys who were on the floor and coaches who were in the locker room. And so that, nobody wanted Tyson to be traded. Coach didn't want that trade. Tyson didn't want to be traded. I'm not going to say Tyson made sure that he failed that physical, but I know that, he didn't want to go to Oklahoma. But at the same time, he was mad that, that he had to come back to New Orleans because they, basically didn't want him. And he knew he was going to be gone the next season. And we traded away a championship because I believe that, the guys that
traded away a championship.
They won that championship. Yeah, that Dirk championship should have been ours. I mean, we had beaten that Mavs team. We had gotten over that Mavs team. And then we send our center over there. We send Page over there. And they win it. We had a chance. Nobody knows this, but we had a chance to get Rip Hamilton, and we went and got Luther Head. And that was the last straw for CP. CP was mad about Tyson. And then when they did literally, we're like, nah, people are telling us like, y'all can get Rip Hamilton. CP's brother knew, we had it like
Jordan connection.
And they were like, nah, Luther Head. It was
Luther Head.
Luther Head was cold.
When that happened, we knew it was over. Like we knew that, I knew CP wasn't gonna, he was gonna one way or the other get out of there because, the team just wasn't looking at things the way that we wanted them to look at it. And Monty came in that last year, and Monty did a great job. Him and Dell did a great job. It was the first time we had talked to the front office about players, and
crazy.
It was the first time we were being included in decisions. And this is like my 8th season in the league. And so it's like that was all new to us. And we knew, but we were just like, yeah, it's just too late. Like we got to go in different directions. Once I hurt my knee, and then we kind of anticipated the lockout coming, we knew that it was just the end of the line.
So the second half of your career that's where you won 2 championships. You were a huge part of that Indiana team that pushed the Heat to 7 twice. When you won the championship for the first time in Golden State, in your post-game interview, you said something to David Aldridge. You said, and before I get to that, I think the second half of your career there was a similar theme in that you often took less money to get to the better situation, right? You turned down like $12 million from the Pacers, took a smaller $3 million deal with the Heat, or with the Spurs, excuse me. Most players don't do that. And when you won the championship, your reasoning for that, you pulled an Egyptian theory that the Egyptians learned that you can't take it with you. So what does that mean?
They would bury themselves with their treasures, and they would bury themselves with sort of the monetary gains that that didn't guarantee, or they could not take it with them. So, the things that you carry with you are your memories, are your experiences. As we get older, we realize like those are the things that are the most valuable. And so I was chasing a feeling more than I was chasing a monetary number. I was chasing the feeling of accomplishment, of like finite. Like I didn't want to go through I had got so close in Indiana. I literally could not imagine playing any more seasons without the possibility. I didn't want to necessarily say it was going to be guaranteed because there's no guaranteed NBA championship. But I said I have to play with that possibility or I can't play. Like I couldn't muster it up to just go out there and play. That's why I kind of retired when I did, because I had options. I didn't like the role that I would have had to go back to Golden State with, which was like and Andre was situated for it, like sitting there in street clothes, kind of being a veteran player coach. I still wanted to play, but then I was like, is it worth you not playing and sitting and being taken on this role, or could you go play? Because I had like 2 or 3 opportunities to go after that, my time in Golden State, and I was like, yeah, nah, it's just not. The fire's not going to be there, right? The reason for doing it is to win. And we had gotten so close, we winning 50 games in Indy and challenging the Heat and playing every game meant something. So that's what I was chasing the last few years of my career, was that meaning, like wanting every game to be important, setting these super high goals. Like that's what I had got addicted to, with my time in Indiana. So that was what the end of my career was about. And then I just wanted to be around or be in that environment because I love coaching. I love coaching youth. But I wanted to see what that championship formula was. Like, how do you do this? Like, how do you get to an NBA championship from start to finish? And, thankfully I was with a really good high level group of guys in Golden State, and we got it done.
When you look back at your 15-year NBA career, what did you most learn from your NBA career outside of basketball, or what lessons did you learn through basketball that ended up, what's the word I'm looking for? Ended up, applying to life, but it almost like, because you seem to me, D West, as like you're not an accident. The success you had in your career is not an accident. Through discipline, through hard work, through educating yourself on things, like it seems like to me, listening to you and watching you from afar, things you have an interest in and want to speak on. What did you learn through your NBA career? You know what I mean? Outside of your legacy as obviously an all-star and what you accomplished on good teams. What did your 15-year career, prepare you for? What did it anything cement you? All the things that you led up to your NBA career, was it worth it? What was your 15 years of experience worth as a total?
Yeah. Well, I would say, like, from my perspective, it just taught me a lesson in humility. And I'll say that you just have to be careful being too humble, because, I think that there were times in my career where I probably should have made the All-Star game 2 or 3 more times. But I didn't have the individual mindset to do so, in terms of the level of, I say selfishness, but in order to be like an elite player, you have to have a level of selfishness. And there were times where I wasn't willing to be that selfish, be that greedy. And also, in terms of not wanting to get outside of what the team's goals and the team's aspirations were. So I would say, like, the biggest lesson would be like this, the fine line humility plays, because at the same time where there were a couple seasons where I probably should have had my foot on the gas for a little bit longer, those are the same seasons where people kind of discount what I did, kind of discount the impact that I had, and because, again, I'm somebody that's I'm not gonna solicit my opinion just out of the blue. I'm not gonna, walk out here and beat myself on the chest and just tell everybody, look at me. But sometimes you have to do that, especially in the NBA. And so that's probably one of the biggest lessons, is just be careful being humble.
D West, now I didn't learn something. Now I knew
because sometimes there are conversations. There are conversations that I hear people have it, and I'm like, man, I should be in the middle of that conversation.
Facts.
But because I was a little too humble, I was a little too reserved, folks don't know I should be in that conversation. And so that's where I say you just have to be, there's a fine line, between where humility can help you, but then there's also a line where humility can, if you go the other way, it can hurt you.
On the opposite side of that fine line is there is fine line between where free thinking can also affect one's career, and regardless of what particular time it comes in and where you're at in your career. For a 20-10 guy, let him think. He want to go in there and paint, you know what I mean? Whatever he want to do, paint his nails, whatever he want to do, let him do it. He's decided a 20-10 guy. We know what he's going to do. Is there a point, looking at that same coin, where free thinking can either help you or hurt you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Because again, we're athletes first. And so it doesn't, just because you're an athlete doesn't mean, Bomani Jones told me this one time, just because you're an athlete doesn't mean anybody wants to hear what you have to say. And we have to remember that, right? And so sometimes, right, your opinion, like nobody wants to hear what you have to say about certain things as an athlete. And I had to learn that. And you also have to learn that, again, some people may not know the perspective that you're coming from. So if you come from a perspective that they don't understand, a lot of times they'll take that offensively, right? Like this guy is saying something that, I don't necessarily understand. And it's offensive to me because I don't have a full context, or I can't understand, what he's saying, on top of him being an athlete that I may not want to hear an athlete's opinion on who the president should be, or taxes or anything like that. So, I figured that out pretty early on. Obviously, like I said, I'm one of these people, like we talked about off camera. I'm one of these people, I can get triggered, and I've gotten better. Like when in the NBA, when I was the Donald Sterling thing was a very triggering thing for me, man, and I was far away from it. But that was the triggering moment for me. So I had a big outburst, and it was a lot of stuff that came with that, which was fine. But you have to know what you're talking about first. And then secondly, you have to understand your audience and understand, like I said, sometimes, your opinion is not, even though it may be valid, it may not be warranted. People may not want to hear it.
That's a bar. Yep.
Man, thank you so much for your time. This was amazing. I know you're not one to do the podcast tours, but whenever you want to talk more, just let us know, because we're all.
Yeah, I got you. I appreciate it, guys. It's been fun.
Yeah, no doubt, D. West.